Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Brown. This is ClarkCountyToday.com. We're taking some time to sit down with some of our local elected officials. And with us today is Sheriff Chuck Atkins. Sheriff, thank you so much for taking the time.
My pleasure.
I wanted to ask you, you are in your second term now. You served the first 4 years. What made you decide to go for a second term?
Well, when I made the decision to run for sheriff, I was retired. And I kind of knew that it would be a two-term deal for me. That was a promise I made to my wife anyway, that 2 terms in would probably give me the opportunity to accomplish things that I felt needed to be accomplished.
I wanted to kind of touch on a sad note. First of all, obviously, you know, we suffered the loss of a deputy in Cowlitz County, your neighboring county. Just give me your reaction to the death of Deputy DeRosier.
It's always a shock, and immediately I flash back to when that happened within our agency, and so I really knew how Sheriff Thurman was probably feeling. I wasn't the sheriff at the time that we lost Sergeant Brad Crawford. However, I was first on the scene, and I was there to see the emotions and the shock on the deputy's face and the police officers' faces that were there. So, you know, it saddened me. I immediately reached out. I happened to be down in California at a family funeral, so I wasn't in town able to reach out directly to him, but I had a phone call with him and a little conversation.
It was interesting because we had the procession shortly after that from Vancouver to Kelso, and obviously the Clark County Sheriff's Office was a major part of that. And we had a small video snippet that we posted of the procession from the overpass in La Center. We posted that. Just the reaction was amazing online, probably our most viral social media post. It was interesting to see sort of that support and outpouring of love for a fallen law enforcement officer. I think juxtaposed a little bit against the recent officer-involved shootings in Vancouver and a lot of the outcry against that. I wanted to kind of get your take on which of those sentiments, which of those public sentiments do you feel most accurately reflects how the majority feels about law enforcement?
I certainly think the one showing the outpouring of love for the loss of a police officer clearly, in my opinion, is the overriding sentiment of the people in Clark County and in our region. However, I give, I don't want to say credit, but I agree with both sentiments in that they're the true emotional feelings of the people involved at the time. Even in our recent shootings, if you'll notice that we didn't have riots in the street, and we didn't have people burning cars, and we didn't have issues like you see in some other parts of the country. Sure, there was people speaking against it. There were people asking questions about it, which we fully expect. And with my 40 years of experience in law enforcement, I've always, or I should say, I learned early on that when tragedy happens, families are impacted in different ways. And even if it's clear to me as law enforcement that the actions taken by law enforcement were proper and just, it still doesn't take away the emotions of the family that may have lost somebody, that may feel that they were unjustly treated. So I try not to let that impact me. I let the people have the feelings that they have, and then let the facts roll out, you know, how it's going to go out. But in Clark County, I think we're very fortunate that, in general, people support the work that we do.
Let me ask you about the incident at Gaiser Middle School. Obviously, that was a big talking point for the community, that riot that happened there. I had an opportunity to read through a lot of the reports, the arrest reports from some of your deputies and their accounts of what they saw and what happened there. And it was sobering to see sort of the behavior that was coming out of some of these 12 and 13-year-old kids. And their attitudes toward law enforcement. Now, there was some talk amongst the community that the recent officer-involved shootings may have played a role in that. There was one report that came out of one of the students or one of the children that was arrested in that incident that talked about that his dad had been shot. I know that obviously there's some stuff you can't talk about. I mean, just give me your sense of that situation as far as you can, of what you know of what happened there.
Again, that's part of, it's no longer a surprise to see how people react, especially if they're part of what they believe were victims prior incident rolls over into a second, and they're maybe more vocal. It doesn't mean we don't do the job that we need to do and take the actions that we need. But again, I understand where that emotion comes from. The shock for me was, at first, I almost had to smile a little bit thinking I hear about a riot at a middle school, and that in and of itself sounds a little odd. But when I saw some of the footage and I read some of the reports and talked with some of the people involved, they were totally shocked with the amount of anger coming from such a young population of folks, especially in our schools, at a time when our community is really used to a little more structure and people being a little more courteous to each other and respecting law enforcement. And to have out and out attack on school officials, physical attacks on school officials, and the name calling and the actions of the young middle schoolers against law enforcement was really a surprise.
What does that tell you in terms of, do you guys need to do you feel like you need to do a better job of sort of communicating in the schools? I mean, just what's your sense of how do you address that attitude amongst people that young?
That's a very good question, and part of that I think starts at home with the parents, and then it does go to the schools. However, the schools should not be the ones responsible for raising those kids in a way that they should show the respect that they should show. Certainly they have a right to protest or to be angry about something, but they need to do it in a civil manner. So again, it was a little shocking, but I don't believe it's the police responsibility to change the way that they act necessarily, except for how we deal with them and interact with them in the schools through our school resource officer program. So we have police officers in the schools. Now, they may not be full-time in the middle school. They may be in the high school, and then they go to the feeder schools to help out with incidents. So we could broaden maybe the scope of our program, getting those law enforcement officers into those schools as often as we can, so that the students get used to seeing them, understanding them. And again, face-to-face interactions, if you know somebody, are more difficult to throw out language that is enticing if you actually have a connection to them. So we will do our part to continue with that school resource officer program and reach out through PAL and other programs where we have the opportunity to be with kids, coach them, mentor with them, answer their questions, and let them see that we're human too. We're no different than their parents. We just have maybe a different job.
One of the things that came out of the officer-involved shootings was a call for police body cams. We've heard from Vancouver Police Chief Jim McIlvaine about that, and he basically said, I'm happy to do it if the city council wants to approve the funding for it. You obviously would have to go through the county council to get the funding for something like that. We're going to talk a little bit later here about the difficulty of getting funding just to do some much needed capital improvements for you guys. So just give me your take on sort of that topic, police worn body cams, lapel cams, whatever you want to call them.
Fundamentally, I have no issue with them. The body cams, in my opinion, 99, probably 0.5% of the time prove the police to be accurate in what they're doing, honest in their statements, and really give clarity. However, I have to look at the Public Disclosure Act and what it means to my agency when it comes to having to retain that amount of video, redact it when requested, and the storage of it, and how we do that, and what does that cost look like at a time when money's tough to come by, and do we replace the actual deputy with just putting cameras on people? It's very expensive, but it certainly is the public disclosure portion of the law that would make it really difficult for us to be able to do that. Again, if the county council chose to do that and it was something they wanted to fund, and we'd be happy to wear them. Now, of course, this would be a conversation with the deputies. They have guilds and unions, and it would be a change to the work environment for them, so we'd have to discuss that with them. But all in all, I have no problem whatsoever with them.
Do you anticipate council at least coming to you and saying, can we put together some sort of a proposal and figure out what it would cost?
Sure, and we're already looking at hiring 2 interns that are going to do an exhaustive study on body cameras, what it looks like throughout the state in those areas that are using it, so we can get a true value and a true cost. The number that I'm hearing out there, even if we had all the body cams purchased in place, we would still need $350,000 a year to maintain the program. That's a big hit. But I don't know that number is totally accurate yet. So that's the first thing I'm hearing. So we're going to do that study for them, and we're going to present it to them and let them make the decision.
Let me move on a little bit, but still staying kind of in the realm of transparency. Now, obviously, law enforcement in Clark County went to encrypted channels, dispatch channels, a while back. There's been some controversy among some people about that. What does that mean in terms of transparency? I've also heard some rumors from some law enforcement officers who say that the encrypted channels can get bogged down, or, because you're dealing with digital versus analog over the air type stuff. What's your take on that? Do you see yourself ever maybe adjusting the system? I know in Portland they have encrypted channels, but dispatch channels are open. They can go to encrypted channels in tactical situations. Just give me your sense about how this encrypted system is working and what you think could be maybe done better.
It was quite a debate in our law enforcement council with all the chiefs of police and the sheriff and all the interested parties. And we didn't all agree 100% on how we wanted to do this. I'll tell you right up front, personally, coming from special operations for the majority of my career before becoming the elected sheriff, I had no problem with encrypting all of our TAC channels, all of our behind-the-scenes channels. I did mention, and we did support wanting to keep our main frequencies, Control 1 and 2, for the dispatch of all the small cities and the city of Vancouver and Clark County, not encrypted, so that press, media, public had a right to it and that we could switch. However, as a council, we try to come to some consensus, and the majority of the people, the chiefs, wanted full encryption. So what you see today is a result of months of back and forth dialogue. But the most important thing, I think, is the interoperability that we have not only within Clark County and or Region 4, which is Skamania, Wahkiakum, and Cowlitz County as well. We're a partner to 5 major counties and the city police departments in Portland. And so we need to be able to communicate. So my final stance was, if encryption is what the majority want, we can't have it if we can't all speak and continue to speak the way that we need to in some mass crisis, some natural disaster that we needed to be able to communicate. So the assurance was there and the interoperability is there, but I do understand there are people in the community that can't as easily turn on a button and listen to what we're doing, and that was an issue for them.
So what I'm hearing you say is you would have been in favor of some sort of a mixed system.
Yes.
With encrypted TAC channels, but...
Yes.
Okay. All right, I wanted to move on. I know you can't say a lot about this. I-1639, some of your colleagues around the state have said that I don't want to go so far as to say that they won't enforce it, but they have said they have some problems with it. You have said you're going to enforce the law as passed by the voters of the state. Just kind of give me a sense of what your stance is on I-1639 at this point.
For me, and I'm going to be pretty limited as to what I say here, and I'll explain that in a moment. I think 1639 is overreaching. Don't like all of it myself. However, it was voted in by the people of the state of Washington. It's my job to enforce the laws that the state and the people put in front of me. So I don't pick and choose the laws I like. I don't just enforce the laws of the people that like me. I don't believe that's what anybody elected me to do. So as we move forward, we'll see what the legal system says about it, and if it needs changing and it is changed, then I will change with that. To go any further, I am party to a lawsuit right now. The NRA and the Second Amendment Foundation have named me as a Clark County Sheriff in a lawsuit in regards to the first piece of 1639 that was implemented. So having said that, I think we probably should not, go any further with that until I kind of get through that little mix-up there.
Gotcha. All right, let's move on then to more pleasant conversations. We got the County Facilities Advisory Committee, more popularly known as CFAC, has been working and working and then working some more, and then delaying and working some more to try and come up with some sort of a proposal for the county jail and some of the other facilities that the county uses. We're expecting, I think the county manager has said sometime in June to finally get that report. I'm sure that you're working closely with them. Just give me your sense on where that process is and what the public should know before that report comes out.
I think we're coming to an end. My role was with the steering committee, myself, the county manager, and the county council chair, trying to keep the bumpers on the guidelines for what it is that we're doing. The 25-person panel, the CFAC working group, was really designed as a sounding block to the community about the importance of a new facility. And their number one mandate at first was, do we need a new jail? My understanding that was unanimous. It was very clear that we do. It's a 35-year-old jail. We can't even get parts for doors that don't work, for the last 14 years. We MacGyver them and fix them ourselves. So it's critical that we continue to move forward. But the reason why I stayed on the steering committee and do not participate in the working group meetings is I didn't want this to be a rubber stamp for what Chuck the sheriff wants. I had my ideas of what I believed we need. I presented those, and now this group of 25 people throughout our community and throughout other elected officials and other working groups within the Clark County, they will make a decision on the design, size, scope, and where it's going to be and what it's going to look like. I have yet to hear the total bed count yet. There's still some debate as to what that looks like. But they're also looking at, do we design a jail for the future that builds in resources to mitigate the kind of people that we're currently bringing into the jail? My jail is not a place for those with mental illness. It's not a place for the homeless that commit misdemeanors, but there's nowhere else for them to go. So my jail bed number can be slightly down, or we can make it look like we don't need as many, only if we remove those folks from the incarcerated facility to resources that help them. If that doesn't change, then the number of the size of the jail needs to be much bigger. But if they include those resources and we do all alternatives to incarceration that we can impose, then we can keep that number down and keep the facility at a reasonable size for the next 10, 20, 30 years.
I think that you've touched on that, the importance, because it's going to come to the voters at some point.
Correct.
Right. I mean, the county doesn't have the money. There's nowhere they can go to get the money to do this. So at some point, they're going to have to go to the voters and say, we need more property tax revenue, we need more sales tax revenue, we need something to do this. And I think what I'm hearing from you is that given the state of what you hear about taxes in the county, the education debate that happened with all the extra funding and the people getting hit with property taxes increases last year while local levies were still in place, and the hue and cry over that and double-digit increases, you're facing a climate as you go forward with this of people that are like, I'm taxed out.
Absolutely.
So how do you go to them and say, approve this much? I just, walk through some of give them a sense of how important this is and why you think they should vote yes when it comes to increasing their taxes to pay for this.
It's very important in any society that we take care of our people. And that means you may need a jail to keep people locked up that want to incriminate others. So we need to do that in a humane way. And if people in the community get a real sense for it, and I'll be happy to give them a tour. our jail is not a place that has all the programs that are needed, the reentry program expansion that is needed to take people that rightfully so may need to be incarcerated, but give them the help to change them as they exit back into our community. And what I try to tell people is everybody in the Clark County Jail will be coming back out into the community. It's not prison. It's not a place where people are going to be locked up for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. This is a cycle of folks coming in and coming back to our community. So we need to be able to help them. Now, having said that, in today's society and the homelessness and the mental illness because of the lack of beds, it's put a huge burden on a jail, and we're now being expected to do things that we would have never done in a jail incarceration mode in the past. And so we need to fix that. And so what I say to people is, this could be your child, this could be your brother, your sister, your mom, your dad. People make mistakes. This could be somebody in your family that has to be in that jail. And should we not make it and I'm not saying we make a party factory out of it, but should it not be a place that is sanitary, that is treating people humanely, that is providing resources to correct their behaviors if they want it? If they don't, we have a way to just lock them up and give them exercise and let them ride out their time. But should we not be helping people that ask for the help, that want the help? Should we not be that conduit? Should we not help them reentry into our community in a way that makes them successful so that they don't come back? And so that'll be that's part of what I've said all along, and that's part of what I'll say in the future as well, is that this is what a humane society does. And Clark County is way behind the curve in the way that we provide jail incarceration with indirect supervision, as we call it, where they're locked in a big room and our people are locked in a small room watching them. There's no huge amounts of interaction, which I think is critical. In direct supervision model jails of today that have been that way for 20 years plus, not only are there less attacks and violence on the deputies and the corrections facility staff and the health facility staff within the jail, there's an interaction to where, just like right now, I'm talking with you and looking in your eyes, and I can sense who you are, what you're thinking, and how this is going. And that's no different in a jail. If I'm not seeing you face to face, I don't know that today you're acting a lot different than you did yesterday. And what is that problem? What can I do to help you with that? And I can solve those problems of suicide, attempted suicide, and the different things that go on in the jail. Maybe I can step in a lot earlier. And I think everybody wants that.
It's going to be a heated conversation, I think, when we get that report and kind of go forward this year. So I'm sure we'll be talking with you about that again.
Good.
I know we're kind of out of time, but I wanted to give you just an opportunity, as we mentioned, before, this is your second term. Just kind of give me your sense of, outside of the things that we've already talked about, what are your goals and your plan for the next 3.5 years?
3.5 years. God, and that'll go by fast.
It does.
What I really am looking for, two things. One is the jail that we just talked about. I think it's very important that we get that moving. I may never see a shovel of dirt dug. I don't know. I would love to. But I would love to see it approved, at least in planning and in design, and a pathway forward to make it happen. I think it's long overdue, and I'll feel really good about that if we know how that's going to happen. At the same time, I'm looking at an aging agency of a lot of experience at the upper end, looking towards retirement and moving out. One thing about Clark County, people love working here. And when they come to work at the sheriff's office, they're 25, 30, 35-year employees. My entire administrative staff is 30 plus years, just like myself. And we're going to see them leaving. So I'm also focusing with equal energy on what do we do internally to prepare those leaders in our agency to be the ones to step up and fill the gaps as we near the end of this next 4-year term. We never know what the sheriff's going to be. It could be an outsider, it could be an insider that's elected. The people would choose that, and the sheriff has the luxury to bring on appoint their own people in certain critical positions. So we don't have a lot of control over that, except that I can show through just the integrity and the personality and the morality of the people in my agency, that anybody stepping in are going to see that these are great people, very experienced and willing to move on into the future with our agency.
Great. Sheriff Chuck Atkins, thank you so much for taking some time to sit down with us.
Thank you for giving me this.
We'll talk to you again soon.
You bet.